Hi friends, Father Carey here, and this is another Holy Spirit moment. This one on the rebellious and visionary Jesus of the artist Fritz Eichenberg. You may not be familiar with Eichenberg's name, but I'd be very surprised if you aren't familiar with at least some of his artwork. He was a woodcutter and a lithographer. He illustrated many books. Most famously, for example, Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, in which he shows Raskolnikov lurking outside the old pawnbroker's door right before he murders her. Or he illustrated Wuthering Heights, in which he shows a pensive, morose Heathcliff staring into the distance under a windswept tree on the Yorkshire Heath. He was also an illustrator of many children's books, both in his native Germany and in the United States, where he migrated when he was still a young adult. But Eichenberg's art is especially known for its religious quality. Beginning in his young adulthood, he became almost obsessed with what he called the rebellious visionary Jew, Jesus, and the rebel that Jesus brought to the earth, the revolution that Jesus wrought in humanity. And most of his artwork reflects that obsession with the visionary, rebellious Jesus. He was born in 1901 in Germany, as I've said. He'll die in the United States in 1990. He very much disliked the Germany of his childhood. He says he felt surrounded by uniforms. Everyone seemed to wear one. Civil servants wore uniforms, postmasters wore uniforms, soldiers, of course, wore uniforms, and the person who made uniforms almost obligatory was, of course, Kaiser Wilhelm. Eichenberg tells us that he felt stymied, closed in, almost suffocated by the regimentation in Germany. He put up with it until he was in his early 30s. And then in 1933, right before the Nazis came to power, he left, located first in Mexico and then in the United States, and finally in New York City. In 1939, following the death of his wife, he seems to have undergone a psychological crisis. And the outcome of that was that he became a Quaker, a Friend. He had been born in a secular Jewish family and had no taste of religious upbringing. But there was something about Quakerism that appealed to him. And what appealed to him especially was its insistence that the light of Christ was to be found in every human being, and that accordingly we are mandated to treat one another as Christs. In 1949, he meets Dorothy Day, the co-founder with Peter Moran of the Catholic Worker Movement. And thereafter, at her invitation, many of his most famous woodcuts and lithographs appeared in the newspaper published by the Catholic Worker Movement. He wrote several essays in one book, and in those essays he again and again explains his vocation as an artist, how he tries to help viewers of his art explore inner space and not become too intoxicated with exploration of outer space. What does he mean by the rebellious visionary Jew, Jesus? Let me read you a passage from an interview with him. He says this: "The figure of Christ, the rebellious visionary Jew, has been for me an overpowering influence on my whole thinking. I'm not good at analyzing that attraction, but it has to do with a reaction to suffering expressed in the symbol of the cross." He goes on to explain how this powerful symbol is important for him as a friend, as a Quaker. "Friends believe that there is Christ in every man, and in fact in every living being. I believe firmly in this. To me, it seems such a simple way of explaining to people what Friends, what Quakers stand for. If you see that of Christ in every living being, you cannot kill. It's that simple. The powerful symbol of Christ's suffering on the cross, for Eichenberg, is the centerpiece of that vision and rebelliousness that he associates with Jesus. And what does that mean? It means, at least for Eichenberg, two things. Jesus rebels against the status quo. Jesus rebels against those social customs and norms and conventions that first allows poverty and secondly legitimizes violence, whether it's interpersonal one-on-one violence or the horrendous violence of war. Poverty and violence are the two status quos that Jesus rebels against. The visionary side of this rebellious Jew is to offer us the prospect of a different way of living, of getting in touch with the God within, both ourselves and others, and acting accordingly. Offers us the vision of the peaceable kingdom. In his woodcuts, Eichenberg returned again and again to Christ suffering with those who suffer. Christ is with those who stand hungry in bread lines. Christ is with those who have no place to call home. Christ breaks bread with them and welcomes them without any reservation to the table. Christ is with those people who lay at the foot of the cross, rejected, forgotten, miserable. Christ is also with those who stand against the oppression of dictators and thugs. As a Jew, even though a secular one, Eichenberg was struck with horror at the Holocaust, and some of his most telling woodcuts depict that horror. He is convinced that if we simply open ourselves up to the Christ within in others and in ourselves, that the dove of peace will vanquish the hawk of war. He has been so influenced by Russian authors such as Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, and he has absorbed into his very being, and that absorption is displayed in his artwork, their message, ultimately, that suffering brings redemption, that no suffering is hopeless, that all suffering points beyond itself to ultimate purpose in the universe and salvation for humanity. Fritz Eichenberg is an artist whose work is profound and moving, and I would recommend it to any and all people who are listening to me today, especially in these troubled times in which we now live, in which there is war in the Middle East, there is war in Europe, there is violence here at home in the United States. There seems to be an absence of vision, and there seems to be great need for rebellion against the status quo in the world today, as in Fritz Eichenberg's lifetime, that countenances violence and poverty. Looking at the woodcuts, the lithographs of Fritz Eichenberg, meditating on the message that they offer us, it seems to me, my friends, is to grow ever closer to the visionary, rebellious Jew. Those of us who are Christians over the past 2 millennia have so forgotten just how visionary and rebellious the man God Jesus actually was. Fritz Eichenberg can remind us of what it is we've forgotten and sorely need to remember. I'm Father Carey, and this has been another Holy Spirit moment. Thank you, my friends, so much. I really do recommend Fritz Eichenberg to you. I'll see you next time. God bless.